year 2022 now, but that doesn't stop me from going back to 2021, the year that just passed. One of the greatest years for comic book properties to hit the big screen, the small screen, and all sorts of screens for us. So today's video, I'm going to be diving into and ranking all 2021 comic book movie villains from worst to best. Now, these are only going to be associated with the properties that I actually got to see. I did not see every comic book movie and every comic book show in 2021, but I did see a lot of the major ones, so this will be my entire opinion and ranking. But the most important about this, guys, is hearing your guys' ranking down below in the comment section. So leave a comment, hit that like and subscribe button, and let's have some fun ranking some comic book villains. Now, I got 21 comic book villains to rank down below, and at number 21, this one is kind of a funny one for me, and that is actually Snake Eyes. Yes, I mean Snake Eyes. Yes, not the movie, the actual character, because he is an absolute dick in that movie. I hated that movie. I wanted to have more of a little bit of a fun one before I get into anything else of this, and the reason that he's ranked last is because he should be the hero of his story, not the villain. He's just an absolute dick in there, and I hated that movie. The more and more I think about it, the more and more disappointed I am about it. And also adding in there, I did not include Thunder Force nor Kingsman in here. Kingsman I just didn't really care enough to talk about anymore, even especially about the villain, which would also be down at the bottom. And Thunder Force I didn't see, and I don't care to. Now jumping into my actual ranking, at my number 20, we have the Lizard from Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, I really love the Lizard back in the comics of the Spider-Man films, and the Amazing Spider-Man, I actually don't mind Dr. Kurt Connor's Spider-Man's Lizard. I think the design of him could be a little bit better, but adding with that in, I don't love the overall design that they do go with, and even adding in there, this character is very cartoonish. Even in the likes of No Way Home, it just seems like they needed another villain to place inside of here. There's not enough depth, there's really nothing to there. He's just a lizard that gets kicked in the face magically in the trailer, but also when you see the movie, you actually see who actually kicks him in the face. That's really all it is. They make jokes that it's a talking dinosaur, and that's some of the best aspects of it. I actually think the more and more that I think about No Way Home, they did miss out on a chance. You know, they changed how Electro looked. Why didn't they go with the more actual realistic look of the lizard? He's still alive. You could have just said that he morphed more into a lizard this time. And coming down on my number 19 is Sandman. Now, Sandman is actually one of my favorite Spider-Man villains of all time. And honestly, in this movie, the more and more, as much as I love No Way Home, it was my favorite film of 2021. I didn't love how they portrayed Sandman. I know these two characters had a little bit of a weird thing where the actors, they couldn't actually get on set, so they did some VFX fun stuff from their previous movies and just did CGI for them. And I like the design of Sandman. I like that he was complete sand the entire time. I liked how they used him for the most part, because overall, by the last time we saw Sandman, he wasn't really a villain, and in this movie, he doesn't start out as a villain, but then at the end, he's fighting them, they're all working together, even though they have completely different goals, and that's maybe just a giant plot hole that now I'm thinking about. But for me, I expected a lot more from Sandman in here because he is one of my favorite Spider-Man villains, and I actually think he's one of the most underrated when it comes down to the entire Spider-Man movie franchise. But in general, I like Thomas Hayden Church in here. I just wanted a little bit more from him in No Way Home. Now, at my number 18, we have Karli from Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Now, Karli, I thought, was a really intriguing character with some decent motives that add a lot of depth to the character, but at any point in time in the series that you thought she was going to be going one way and develop her character even better, it hurt her in the long run and completely destroyed her character in the next moment or the next episode, leading me to really not care about Karli whatsoever. And it sucks because there's nothing wrong with the performance here. It just comes down to a poorly written character, or maybe even a poorly edited character. I still very much believe there was a lot more to Falcon and Winter Soldier that hit the cutting room floor, and I think that is exactly what happened with Karli. And at my number 17, it is Shriek, Carnage's lover in Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Not much to this character in its actuality. The performance here is actually pretty decent, and I like the design of Shriek. I like the relationship between her and Carnage, and she does have some cool moments, but other than that, there's nothing really there that leaves me or itches me to go back and really much be like, this is one of the coolest villains of 2021, especially when you look at all the great comic book movie villains that we got this year, and in general, just some of the great comic book movies that we also also got. Shriek is one of those ones that's just a little bit forgettable. It's fun to see because I am a big fan of her from the comics. I just wanted a lot more. And you'll kind of see that from a lot of the villains that I have down at the bottom. At my number 16 is actually one of the biggest disappointments for me for a villain, because there's two villains in this movie. One we'll talk about in a second, but then there's this one. And I will say, spoilers for every movie leading up near here. So if you haven't seen any of the comic book movies or you're missing one and you hear me mention the villain, run away real fast, skip to the next one. I'll have time codes down below. But on my next one, it is the Deviants from Eternals. Now, I really like the Eternals. In fact, I kind of love it even on more rewatches. I know it's not for everyone. That's totally fine. But for me, the Deviants were such a disappointment. I did like the look of them. I liked the portrayal of them. I liked the evolution of them. And I even liked Bill Skarsgård's little mini performance when he actually got to talk. And you get to hear how, in a sense, they are the parallel to the Eternals. A very intriguing layer in there that was missing elements because it seems like it was more of focus on the Deviants or focus on the Eternals. They definitely went more towards the Deviant route. And that's fine. But they definitely, I honestly think in the end of the day, should have just left the Deviants to just be these wild monster creatures and actually lead out to be what the actual villains is. And I think that actually would have made more sense for the story than trying to further out the evolution of what the Deviants were. You could have just gotten that across from some of the expositional heavy scenes that they already went about in. Now at my number 15, it is one of my favorite comic book villains of all time, as well as one of my favorite comic book villains from TV history, and that is Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. Now he's this low only for the sake of being, he was barely in the Hawkeye show. Now he was all behind the scenes working along. We get hints that it's the big guy, and we finally get the confirmation that Vincent D'Onofrio is back in the world as Daredevil within the Hawkeye series. I assume we will see him soon. There is no way they killed him off. And for what we got to see, he's badass, he's ferocious, he's ripping doors off, he's kicking the shit out of Kate Bishop, and then she wins on a technicality. But anyways of that nature, I really love Vincent D'Onofrio. It's great seeing him back as Kingpin, but again, we didn't get enough of him in this role, and I would have liked a lot more of him in Hawkeye. I actually think it would have been smart to maybe introduce him earlier in the series than keeping him this big mystery throughout, because honestly, midway through, I think almost all of us were sitting there going, yeah, it's gotta be Kingpin. At my number 14, this one is a little bit weird because it's the Redroom, it's Drekov, and it's the Taskmaster all mixed into one. I didn't want to include just henchmen, and it sucks saying that Taskmaster is a henchman because Taskmaster is one of my favorite villains from the Marvel comic book series, and the fact that it is just a henchman very much disappoints me because this villain should have been top tier. And sadly, it was cool to see Taskmaster. I like the costume, but I expected a lot more of this. And maybe just not this mindless zombie, even though I will say I did like the twist, and I hope we get more development from Taskmaster later down the road. This could change, but we're only including what I saw in this movie. As well as the Red Room, there's not much to it than more than what we've already known before. And same thing with Drekov. I liked how scary his motives were, and my girlfriend really much said it perfectly when we went and saw Black Widow. She said, this is a villain that is horrifying and very much goes to a triggering type of sense to many females out there. And in her perspective, I understand why this is one of the scariest villains, but I wish they would have really much dove into Drekov a little bit deeper, and in general, just Taskmaster and everything going about this. Interesting ideas, just not executed completely great. Now we come down to my number 13, and this is Woody Harrelson's Carnage. One of my favorite comic book villains of all time is Carnage, and I thought Woody Harrelson absolutely killed it in this role, and I like the visual effects for Carnage. I like how Carnage looks. I like how big and skinny and monstrous he is, but I expected a lot more from Venom Let There Be Carnage, and while I enjoyed the movie overall, this character deserves more development. And, you know, there was a sacrifice in here. Character development or fun B-rated action film. And Andy Serkis definitely went for a more B-rated action film. And that's exactly what we got with Carnage here. I, again, wanted more. And it is a little bit disappointing that they killed him off already because it's like really one of the biggest comic book movie villains and you just kill him off like that. And I wanted more. I expected more. But if that's all we're going to get, then fine. It was fun for what it was. Coming down at my number 12, it is Ultron from the What If Marvel Studios series, a series that I absolutely really enjoyed. There were many villains that I could have included in there, but clearly Ultron was the big villain that brought the Guardians of the Multiverse together to fight with the Watcher. A formidable Ultron villain that actually makes me like Ultron a little bit more, even though I like him in Age of Ultron. I think he's pretty good in there. I just, again, more development would have been needed in that situation. I love what they did with him in What If. He is ferocious, he's badass, he was very menacing and scary, taking on the Watcher, taking on the Guardians of the Multiverse, and really much being a formidable foe. Again, just wish they would have introduced him a little bit earlier to really much further out his cause inside the multiverse. Maybe we'll see him eventually later on, maybe we won't. For what we did, I thought it was cool. Point of reference, 11 and up, I absolutely pretty much really like to love all these villains, so it will be a lot of fun hearing your guys' thoughts down below. And again, this is my full opinion. If you disagree with me, that's completely fine. My girlfriend gave me the concept and idea to do this ranking, and I was like, that's a pretty good ranking, so let's do that. If you want to join along with me in the comment section, I did put down below in the description every villain that I did rank in here, so make sure to leave a comment. If I missed any, or if there's any comic book properties I didn't talk about, then also let me know down below as well how you guys would rank them. I know Titans and Doom Patrol got some really cool villains as well. I sadly just have not caught up on those seasons yet. My number 11, we have Alfred Molina's Doc Ock. Now here's the thing, I absolutely love Alfred Molina's Doc Ock. I think he's still one of the best Spider-Man villains, and also one of just in general the best comic book villains of all time. But if we're just looking at Spider-Man No Way Home, a majority of the film, he's actually not evil. He's pretty much on their side, or he's just not even in the movie. The bridge sequence is pretty freaking awesome, which actually gets him up to this scale. And I do like when Doc Ock is going crazy and mean, and he's fighting against Peter, even though it is not just him, it's the tentacles and all the voices talking. Once they fix him, he goes back to being the Doc Ock that we know and love. And I appreciated that. I like that. And again, he falters here because he's really not a villain throughout a majority of this story as much as I did like him. Now at my number 10, we have Jamie Foxx's Electro, who from the clear start of it all, even though he wants something different, you can already tell he does not want to be fixed. And here's the thing, I don't love Electro in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I appreciate what they were trying to do with him, but this was a complete upgrade from a design output and from the personality output. That is who Electro is for me when I read the comic books, and I think Jamie Foxx fit that really well. I like the electricity, I like the new outfit, I liked how badass he was, and honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing more of Max Dillon in the future of the Spider-Man universe. My number 9, we have Amanda Waller from the Suicide Squad. When you watch that movie, overall, there's a couple different villains in here, like Thinker I could have included, and pretty much it's a whole movie about villains, but there's two clear villains in here for me, Amanda Waller and Starro. Now, we'll talk about Starro in a little bit, but for me, Amanda Waller was a gigantic villain in here, seeing how she didn't care if the entire city got killed, she just wanted to cover up her ass, and for me, it was Viola Davis's performance that bumped this one up quite a bit for me. Again, I would have liked a little bit more of Amanda Waller in here, but I do think the Suicide Squad is a perfect DC and comic book movie in general, and it was one of my favorite movies of the entire year. I love the film to death. It's actually the one I rewatched the most last year, and thankfully I got to, because I was very happy to include Amanda Waller in here, and again, you will see Starro a little bit higher on this list. At my number 8, it is Agatha. Agatha All Along. Cue the music. Agatha All Along. Agatha is one of the coolest characters in the MCU, I think, so far, and one of the ones that has been introduced thus far. And for me, as it goes about in here, she's catchy, she's charismatic, and Kathryn Hahn absolutely kills this role. One of the big things for me, though, when it comes down to Kathryn Hahn's Agatha, though, is I do feel like in the final acts of the story, she kind of just comes down to just being, we need someone for Scarlet Witch to fight, and I'm looking forward to what they do with her in her show to maybe give her a little bit more development. A really cool character with a lot of cool developments that gets bumped up because of the amazing performance that Kathryn Hahn developed here. At my number 7, we have Kang, or the One Who All Who Knows, or something of that nature. It's Kang the Conqueror, in a sense. It's just not the Kang that we all know and love yet from the comics. This is a different variant version of him. Jonathan Majors was casted as him. He will be the main villain in Ant-Man and the Wasp 3, Quantumanium, and for me, when it comes down to Kang, I've been looking forward to this character. I've been dying to see this character. Loki was one of the biggest surprises for me in 2021. Wasn't excited for the show. Absolutely loved the show. And I know not everyone loves what Kang was all about and how he pretty much was just behind the scenes, and I guess, yes, at the same point in time, Kingpin was behind the scenes the entire time, and I didn't love Kingpin that much in this series yet. But for me, Kang made the wait worth it. every single layer and sense of what the finale brought about felt like, when you go back to watch Loki, it feels like his presence was there the entire time. It feels and means it in such an entirety. And for me, when it comes down to, a lot of this is because of Jonathan Majors' performance, the script they gave him, the way that it was a big exposition dump, but an exposition dump that I absolutely was fascinated from top to bottom. And really much, this was an interesting aspect that developed more of what the multiverse was and left a lot of imposing questions for Loki season 2, with Sylvie's choice to kill this version of Kang, as well as what his other variants might be doing. It was one of the most fascinating and most coolest introductions to an MCU character this year, and I loved it. Now at my number 6, we have Icarus and the Celestials. Now I decided to split these ones up and combine them together, because for me, for a majority of it, you really don't know if Icarus is going to be a hero or not. And same thing with the Celestials. Are they on our side or are they not? Towards the end, once you get that twist that Icarus is actually betraying his friends and going with the Celestials' duties, there's a lot of common ground and in general thought-provoking elements there. And just as we see Kumail Nanjiani's character Kingo not want to go along with them, but says, I can't fight you guys, but I'm still going to believe what I believe. It is a big element of believability and theologicalness that I thought was one of the most intriguing aspects of this entire film, The Eternals, and one of the reasons that I absolutely loved a lot of moments for it. And especially as it comes to Icarus and the Celestials being two of the coolest characters that we got in 2021, I was very much heartbroken from Icarus's choices, but you understand why he is a man of action, a soldier in all those avenues, and the Celestials for me were just a really cool avenue to add into there. I love their development and I love their thought-provoking elements, and I can't wait to see how the Celestials are developed later on in the MCU. Now my number 5, it is the giant starfish from the Suicide Squad, Starro. What an awesome villain that really much works in its finale for the Suicide Squad, not just for a grand action piece that kicks ass, but also a brutal, bloody, and weird kaiju battle that we haven't gotten in quite a while, besides Godzilla vs. Kong, which is pretty damn cool. But for me in this element, the reason that Starro is so high is, one, a lot of it is nostalgia. I never believed that they would actually do this character in live action, and James Gunn brought it to life in a realistic way. But the other way is when he says at his end, his final line is, I just wanted to float among the stars. I was the happiest at this point. There was an element of that that brings such a sincerity, and especially on the multiple rewatches that I've given to the Suicide Squad, it breaks my heart each and every time seeing that he was a prisoner of this. The United States government took him from his home and completely destroyed everything that he was happy for. It's sad, it's demented, but it also at the same point in time makes me love Starro. My number 4, it is Wen-Wu. Not just an antagonist in Shang-Chi, but arguably one of the main protagonists of this entire story. Shang-Chi came out of nowhere and absolutely was one of the biggest surprises. But in general, I knew this film was going to be great, but I didn't expect it to be this great. Being one of my favorite MCU films of the year, one of my favorite films of the year, Wen-Wu, Tony Leung, absolutely killed it in this role, and his performance is one of the reasons that he is in my top 5. I'm so sad that he died in this movie because I would have loved to have seen more of Wen-Wu, but this real version of the Mandarin was the Mandarin that I've wanted to see for a while. I loved how kick-ass he was with the rings. I loved how they made the rings look. His feelings, and just in general, his love for his family, but also his motivation to find his wife was heartbreaking and phenomenal as well. And at my number 3, it is the only non-Marvel or DC villain on here, and it is Omni-Man from Invincible. One of my favorite things of this year was Invincible. I'm currently going through the graphic novels because I can't wait for the next season. I gotta figure out what's happening. And while they have definitely changed a lot, they are following it very well. And Omni-Man, played by J.K. Simmons, not just a brutal, visceral character that is truly a damn villain, but when you find out everything that it needs to be at the end of the day of what this character is all about, it makes it to be one of the most fascinating villains of 2021 for a comic book property. I loved Omni-Man, and I think there's so much more to him that I can't wait to learn about more in season 2. And at my number 2, a lot of the reason that Steppenwolf is my number 2 is because of how much development Zack Snyder's Justice League truly gave to him, and it really goes to show why Zack Snyder's Justice League was one of my top 15 movies of 2021. I loved this movie with such a hard passion. It was everything I've wanted that Justice League movie to be back in the day, and it was the exact thing that I wanted Zack Snyder to bring to life. It is easily maybe his best film yet, and that's a really hard bargain to say. I'm still torn between Man of Steel and that, but seriously enough, Speaking just on Steppenwolf, the development, the depth, the actual emotion that you see behind this character, and the really much the visual effects that they put into his eyes, his emotion that you feel when he's talking to Darkseid, he feels like a prisoner in himself, that he has no other choice to do this. I love what they were able to do to Steppenwolf here, and he's easily one of my favorite villains, my second favorite villain of 2021. The only other thing that maybe would have bumped him into my number one is a little bit more development for him overall, but as well, I wanted to tie in Darkseid in here as well because it was great to see him too. But at my number one, it is Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. Now here's the thing. I believe that Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin is one of the best comic book performances of all time, even before No Way Home. Then he comes back to do it, and he is once again one of the scariest villains of all time. There is a lot of nostalgia here for me because I loved the original Spider-Man movie. It was my first drive-in film I ever saw. Green Goblin, Willem Dafoe was intense and scary in there, and for me gave one of the best performances in there. And I remember having nightmares of that mask and his voice and his laugh, and all of those trickled back here, but an even more scarier and intense performance, because what Willem Dafoe was able to do was sink his teeth back into this role, but with the mask being broken, you were able to see every flinch, move, smile, and laugh on his face, and it really improved his performance all the way. You really much feel for Willem Dafoe in here, and it is an intense, garnishing performance that when Tom Holland is punching him in the face, and he's just smiling and laughing, and the expression doesn't change, and it just gets bigger and bigger. It is intense, it is lovely, and I freaking love Willem Dafoe in here. It is again my favorite comic book movie villain of the entire year, and one of my favorite performances of the year as well. I loved a lot of these villains. I didn't love all of them, but I did love a lot, and I'm really happy that we got such great comic book properties this year. But I can't wait to see your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section, so leave a comment, hit that like and subscribe button, let me know down below your guys' thoughts once again, and I can't wait to keep talking movies with you guys. Got tons of content planned for 2022, and I can't wait to have you guys here with me. So of course, until next time, stay classy.